Welcome to Crime
So
Crazy,
close.
the weekly true crime podcast with Aaron Plime,
Ready.
where we prove,
And Diana Seacon.
but we're still crazy
We
for a
know
good
nothing.
true crime story.
Nothing about our legal system.
Yay! That was a double eye roll. It was.
Yay. Was it?
I like
I try
the
so
Diana
hard, but I
face.
feel like I'm just contorting my face into horrible places.
I think that might be true. So Diana, how's it
there's
going?
so many of them. I think we added a new one last week.
You busy enough? Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm busy enough too.
It is going.
What?
I think so, yes. How about you?
What?
Oh, but do you know what? You know what we're going to do this weekend?
Yeah.
We're going to go to a house in the middle of nowhere. I'm not actually sure where. I should look into that. With our girlfriends.
It's okay. That sounds good.
And we're going to become very inebriated, I'm guessing.
Awesome.
And then the next day we're going to go see the House on the Rock, which I hear is all sorts of fucked up. And
There's
then
some water?
I think more inebriation.
Like maybe a lake.
I think there's a deck or something. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. I should find my
might remember my
swimsuit.
swimsuit, which I forget every time.
So many times. That's funny.
Oh my God. I have so
Well,
many
I am looking
because
forward
I've
to
had
that
to buy
break.
them at my
But you
destination.
know what else I'm looking forward to? Yes.
Me telling you that Crime Crazy
Thank
is sponsored by...
Thank you.
Yay! Seb Bryce,
Thank you.
Courtney Ellis, and Dave Hatt. Crime Crazy sponsors
Yes.
support us through
Awesome.
Patreon at the $10 per month level or above, and they're awesome. Thank you. A special thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. If you would like to be awesome like them, you should check out patreon.com/crimecrazypod.
Yes.
If you don't like Patreon,
You did.
that's cool.
You said it
We
with a
also
question mark
have
at the
Buy
end,
Me
but
a
that is in
Coffee.
fact what it is called.
Did I say it right? I feel like I always forget it. It is. And if you want to fact check
You
me,
did.
go check
You
out
did
our
in all
website
of our little episode art.
crimecrazy.com because Aaron put cute little buttons there. Yes.
I believe that we did.
Did we do the shout out for the one that I lost
Yay!
last week? Okay. Well, if not, hey, Pravina, we love you. If you'd like to receive a shout out, you can rate and review us on, I don't know what the damn podcast
cool.
platforms are. I'm not going to lie. I have a bunch of them on my phone. Apparently iTunes is dead.
That's right.
So find one of those, leave a review, maybe let us know about it so we know where it is. Also, we're still giving out stickers. So if you would like to email us at Erin, ERYN, at crimecrazy.com.
That's an amazing
or Diana
offer,
at
guys. You should take her
crimecrazy.com.
up on it
We will send you
immediately.
stickers. I will even go to the post office for you. You should see the pile of returns I have because I do not want to go to the post office.
Yay!
You can also follow Crime Crazy on all the social medias
Yes.
at Crime Crazy Pod. Erin,
Oh, did I?
did you
And it is fucked up, Diana.
learn something this week? Ooh.
So the way that I learned this is I
kind of what I
said
needed.
to my darling husband, what should I learn about this week? Actually, I said it to Tobin too, but his answers were mostly like Minecraft and whether or not you can beat me in Mario Kart and stuff like that, which is clever. I can beat him in the races. I cannot usually
Can you
beat him in the
him
battles.
in Mario Kart?
That little sucker is evil. Yes, it is true. So, what David
He is
found
from
for
Toddler.
me is something called Radathor. Well, I could. So,
Are you gonna
I mean,
kill
I
yourself?
couldn't because I don't have any. But
Holy
if
shit.
we were living in the early 1920s, I would potentially have access to Radathor, which was a medicine / energy drink that was basically triple distilled water and radium. And it did some jobs, yes. So
that will certainly do the job,
it was manufactured from
eventually
the just before 1920 until like through most of the 1920s, and it was marketed as basically a cure-all. Mm-hmm. It could cure impotence, it could cure injury, it could like make you buff, it could just anything that might be wrong with you or anything that you wanted to change, you just drink Radithor. Yeah. So it would definitely cure your sinus infection.
I've got a sinus infection.
Until. I was
going to say, I also have a fat ass, but I feel like the radiation
I'd like to tell you about one person who took Radithor, whose name was Ebenezer Byers, who went by, I guess, Eben? Yeah. So Eben was like an athlete. He was an amateur golf champion. He was very preppy, and was relatively successful until in 1927 he fell and he injured his arm. And I don't know what kind of injury this was, but apparently it was painful. And so for his pain, his doctor prescribed him Radithor. And Radithor was by this point, it was a relatively established product because this was 1927, which was like almost the end of Radithor. In fact, Byers had a lot to do with the end of Radithor. But basically, it was created by this guy who had been a medical student and then dropped out, but just told everybody he graduated, which was a lot easier to do in like the 1910s. And so he told everybody that he was a doctor and he created this stuff. And he said that it would stimulate your endocrine system. But the real trick was that whenever a doctor prescribed it, he would pay them. Right. So they'd get kickbacks. So they prescribed it more often. So Byers was in pain. His doctor, His doctor prescribed Radithor. Huh. He took it several times a day. And at first it made him feel a whole lot better. So he said it gave him a toned up feeling, until after like 3 years of taking it, when he had to stop because he had lost so much weight, he had headaches, his teeth just rotted right out of his head. In 1931, the Federal Trade Commission was like, hey, can you come tell us about your experience? Like, we've pulled this drug from the market because people are getting sick. And he was so sick he couldn't travel. So all of his, oh God, this is so nasty. All of his upper jaw, except for the very front part with his 2 front teeth, and most of his lower jaw all had to be removed because it was just disintegrating. And he was getting holes in his skull and he was sort of rotting from the inside out. He died in 1932, so 5 years after hurting his arm. Yes. They attributed the death to radiation poisoning, but it was actually due to like a million cancers that he got from the radiation. They buried him in a lead-lined coffin because he was seriously radioactive after death. But when they exhumed him in 1965 to do some additional studies, he was still highly radioactive.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Marie Curie's notes are still locked up because they're so radioactive. And I got to thinking about that, I don't know why, a while ago.
And look at
because
that.
I'd heard that, like, they're very protected. Like, you can't go in and like, read her notes and stuff. And I was rehearing this somewhere. And I remembered that I have visited Marie Curie's grave. She's at the Parthenon in Paris.
Yeah.
And I got to thinking, like,
Gotcha.
well, that seems like a bad idea there. But her coffin is lead-lined.
So as sick as all of this is, I have to end on kind of a funny note, which is the Wall Street Journal article in 1990, where they talked about Rita Thor and the Byers incident. And the title of the article was, "The Radium Water Worked Fine Until His Jaw Came Off."
Oh, God.
Right. So that's what I learned this week.
That is a symbol that things are not going well. Oh, my God. Liam and I have been listening to Sawbones. So we're still like really early in the series, and we listened to the one about radium. And it's just like, just because something does something doesn't mean it's good for you guys.
I'm excited.
That's like pre-story advice.
Yeah.
But oh my
I mean,
God,
it's all kind of a balance, right? Even today, most drugs will kill you. It's just taking the right dosage to kill whatever it is you're trying to kill before it kills you, and then stopping in time.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When Jeff was first diagnosed, he had to have a PET scan. And he was lightly radioactive for about a day. So it wasn't bad enough that, like, some treatments, they advise you to, like, check in a hotel, or they keep you in the hospital, or, like, try to limit your exposure. And it wasn't that necessary for that. He wasn't that radioactive, but we couldn't hug him for a day. And it was the worst. It was so bizarre because he's like, running around feeling fine. Everything's great. But like, I can't kiss him. I can't hug him. I wasn't sure I should sleep next to him.
Just a bit.
Just lightly radioactive. Lightly.
Yeah, he was expensive on the inside.
One of his chemos was platinum based, so he used to tell
he was expensive anyway, but no. So, Diana, do you have a story that can top my radioactive energy drink? Ooh, I'm ready. I don't
think so, but it's kind of the same timeline. We're on retro. So, however long ago it was on Crime Crazy that we recorded, and it was my turn, I talked about the now disappointing H.H. Holmes while we were in Chicago for the True Crime Podcast Festival. And I wasn't... I know. I'm still really upset about the whole thing. I wasn't ready to leave Chicago the city, and I'm not ready to leave Chicago as a source of stories. So today, I'm going to talk about one of the most famous murders in Chicago, the murder of John Dillinger. John Herbert Dillinger was born on June 22nd, 1903 in Indianapolis, Indiana, to John Wilson Dillinger and Mary Ellen Molly Lancaster, and was the second of their two children. His sister Audrey was 14 years older than he was. John Wilson Dillinger was a grocer that John Herbert later described as firm in his discipline. John Herbert's mother died when he was 4, and at the time, widowed fathers who apparently couldn't do anything for themselves would generally make arrangements for the kids. So the arrangement that John Wilson made was to marry off Audrey and send John Herbert to go live with her and the new hubby. She and the new hubby would eventually have 7 children together, but at the beginning of their marriage, Audrey was taking care of her little brother. And in 1912, a few years after John Herbert's mother died, John Wilson married Elizabeth Lizzie Fields, and they had 3 more children together. John Herbert was not a fan of his stepmother at first, but he eventually came around, and he and Lizzie had a 3-year-long sexual relationship.
Oh, my.
About which not nearly enough has been written.
I mean, that seems like plenty.
Like, that's literally all there is. Like, how did this happen? Did his dad know? What the fuck?
Right.
Yeah. So, John Herbert was noted for getting in trouble with the law on the regular as a teenager, and known for his, and I quote, bewildering personality.
Oh, that's just great.
He quit school to go work in a machine shop in Indianapolis, but his father thought that the big city was corrupting his son, so he moved the whole family to Mooresville, Indiana in 1921.
I'm guessing that was not what was corrupting him.
Are you reading my notes? He was already on his way, because it turns out that the big city was not the root of his criminal activity. And the next year he was arrested for auto theft. His troubles with the law and his father, who wasn't exactly thrilled about this latest development, led him to enlist in the Navy, where he was a petty officer, 3rd class. But he deserted ship a few months later in Boston and was eventually dishonorably discharged.
Because we couldn't see that one coming.
He moved back to Mooresville and married Beryl Ethel Hovius.
Oh my God. That poor woman.
Oh, yeah. In 1924. He tried to go on the straight and narrow for a while, but he was really bad at holding down a job and being a married man. So he and his buddy, Ed Singleton, started planning the robbery of a local grocery store.
Perfect.
They got away with $50, and during the commission of the crime, John smacked someone on the head with a machine bolt wrapped in a cloth and a gun.
Oh my God.
That's not the sentence I meant. He smacked somebody in the head with a machine bolt wrapped in cloth, and he had a gun. The gun discharged, but it didn't hit anybody.
Okay. Well, that's still great.
Dillinger and Singleton were arrested the next day, having been recognized by a minister who alerted the police.
Oh, so they're good at this.
Singleton pleaded not guilty. John Wilson had a chat with the county prosecutor and somehow convinced John Herbert to confess, plead guilty, and definitely not to talk to a defense attorney.
Well, that is great advice.
John Herbert was convicted of assault and battery with intent to rob and conspiracy to commit a felony. He expected a lenient sentence since Daddy had talked to the prosecutor.
Yeah.
But he was sentenced to 10 to 20 in prison.
Well, that worked out well.
His father was appalled and later told reporters that he regretted the advice that he'd given his son.
Yeah.
He pleaded with the judge to reduce the sentence, but that didn't work, so John Herbert was on the way to prison. But first, he had to make a stop in Mooresville and testify against Singleton, during which he made a quick escape.
Oh.
But he was recaught in a few minutes.
Oh my God, a few minutes, not a few days or a few weeks. He's not a Ted Bundy.
No. A few minutes.
A few minutes.
Singleton was sentenced to 2 to 14 years, and he only outlived Dillinger by 3 years. He was killed by a train after he passed out drunk on the tracks in 1937.
Oh my God. How does one pass out drunk on the tracks? Like, that's the worst place to pass out.
No. Yeah.
I think he was murdered.
Yeah.
Someone did that.
Drunk. He was drunk.
Well, okay. So, but of all of the places in the world that you might be and pass out, I just think it was murder. That's my conspiracy theory.
No, it doesn't sound like there's any speculation that he was murdered. He just was drunk.
No, I think he was murdered.
You keep speculating.
Yep. That is my speculation.
So I initially thought when I was reading up on this that John Wilson had gone to the defense attorney to tell him to throw the book at his kid. You know, as robberies go, it wasn't that big of a deal. Nobody was hurt. It was $50, which in the 30s or 20s, I guess at this point, it was a much bigger deal than it is now, but still, it was fine. So when I first read he went and talked to the prosecutor, I assumed he's going to be like, hey, you know what? My kid's going down a bad path. Why don't you go ahead and set him on the straight and narrow?
Right. That makes sense.
But throughout all of this, and we'll get to it a little bit more, he was working to get his kid out. He appealed to the judge after John was sentenced and was like, that is way too much for this crime. Will you reduce it? And the judge said no. He went out later and got signatures for a petition to get his kid out of jail.
Oh, wow.
He knew he fucked up.
Right.
And it wasn't at all to throw the book at his kid. It was like to work something out.
Well, I mean, it makes sense, right? Like, you would want it to be temporary. Like, hey, we want to turn my kid's life around, not permanently throw him in prison for the rest of his life.
Right. Not.
Yeah, not so. Right. Temporary, not permanent.
No, that was kind of the impression I got, is that it was, he's going down a bad path. Help me stop that.
Right. Yeah. Didn't work.
No. So, as we all know, prison's just a training ground for criminals, and studying crime seems to be what Dillinger decided to do with his time inside.
Well, what a great use of time.
What else you can do?
True.
When he was admitted to the Indiana Reformatory, he was quoted as saying, "I will be the meanest bastard you ever saw when I get out of here."
Well, that's great. Some good reform happening there.
He befriended lots of other criminals, specializing in bank robbery.
Great.
His new friend, Homer Van Meter, taught Dillinger how to be a successful criminal, and he and his buddies planned all the crimes they'd get up to after they were released.
A great use of time.
Dillinger also studied Herman Lamb's meticulous bank robbing system and used it extensively after he was released from prison. Lamb's system was inspired by the military, and tactics included the use of roles during the robbery, like lookout, getaway driver, lobby man, vault man.
Nice.
They also used modern weapons, like the Thompson submarine.
Great.
Submachine gun, not submarine.
Submarine
gun. And bulletproof vests. And he also made GITs, which were detailed getaway maps to improve their chances of escaping after the robbery.
Great.
Powerful cars, like the V8 Ford Coupes, which, by the way, was the favorite car of Clyde Barrow, were used for the robbery because they were high-powered. They could go faster than most other cars, but then they'd be discarded later to get the cops off to the trail.
Right.
And they would also keep caches of gasoline and medical kits in case any of them were injured during the robberies.
These
are like Boy Scout bank robbers.
Yeah, they are insanely well organized.
They have, did they build a model? Is there a spreadsheet involved?
Right.
In 1933, after 9.5 years in prison, and maybe due to the 188 signatures on the petition that his father circulated, John Dillinger was released from prison. You may recall that 1933 was the height of the Great Depression. Mm-hmm. And faced with no prospects, Dillinger immediately went back to crime.
I mean, that was his plan. He studied.
Right. So, on June 21st, 1 month and 11 days after getting out of prison,
oh, wow,
he robbed the New Carlisle National Bank in New Carlisle, Ohio, getting $10,000. In July, he knocked over the commercial bank in Daleville, Indiana. That got $3,500.
Okay.
In August, Bluffton Bank of Bluffton, Ohio, was relieved of $6,000.
Relieved, okay.
And later in August, he hit Massachusetts Avenue State Bank in Indianapolis, getting $21,000.
He's doing great.
So Dayton police were on his tail. He was captured by them and taken to jail in Lima, which, because I have lived in Ohio, I know is pronounced Lima and not Lima, like it's fucking spelled.
Well, like lima beans.
Lima, it's pretty near Versailles and Berlin.
Yeah.
Living in Ohio is very frustrating for me. When they were searching him on his way into jail, they found what looked like to be a prison escape plan, but Dillinger wouldn't tell them what it really was.
Well, duh.
It was 100% an escape plan.
Right.
While he was in the Indiana Reformatory, he helped plot the escape of 8 guys he'd met in prison, most of whom worked in the laundry.
Great.
Dillinger arranged for guns to be smuggled into their cells, and they used those guns to escape 4 days after Dillinger was captured in Ohio.
4 days.
This group was known as the First Dillinger Gang, and as soon as they got out, 3 of them hauled ass to Lima.
Right.
The 4 arrived in Lima on October 12th and impersonated Indiana state police officers, saying that they were there to extradite Dillinger back to Indiana.
Nice.
When asked for their credentials, Harry Pete Pierpont shot the sheriff dead, released Dillinger, and went back to Indiana.
Well, there you go.
The gang went on the lam, hitting 4 more banks to the tune of $114,822.
Holy shit.
Between October of 1933 and January of 1934, going as far west as Racine, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Besides robbing the banks, the gang would also rob state police arsenals to stock up on machine guns, rifles, revolvers, ammo, and bulletproof vests.
Oh, yeah, I gotta have the weapons.
On December 14th, 1933, Chicago Police Department Detective William Shanley was killed. The police suspected that the robbery of the Unity Trust and Savings Bank was the work of the Dillinger gang. It wasn't, but Detective Shanley was following up on a tip that led him to Dillinger gang member John Red Hamilton at a local garage.
Oh.
When Shanley approached Hamilton, Hamilton shot him.
Just for being...
This murder led...
Just because he was a cop and he was there and...
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, he knew he was a cop.
Right. Great.
This murder led to the Chicago PD putting together a 40-man Dillinger squad.
Nice.
The gang, along with Dillinger's girlfriend, Evelyn Billy Frechette, took a little winter vacation to Florida after that.
Nice.
Dillinger went back to Chicago in January, and some of the other guys drove out to Tucson. On January 15th, Dillinger and Hamilton robbed the First National Bank in East Chicago. During this robbery, Dillinger committed his first and only murder of Chicago patrolman William Patrick O'Malley. O'Malley shot Dillinger 4 times, but the bullets were stopped by his bulletproof vest.
Right, because, yeah.
In return, Dillinger fired his Tommy gun, leaving a perfect row of 8 bullets across O'Malley's chest.
Oh, my God. Okay.
The police were closing in, so Dillinger and Hamilton decided it was time to visit the rest of the boys in Tucson. But on January 21st, the hotel in Tucson where they were all staying caught fire, and the gang was forced to flee without their luggage. 2 of the gang members gave several firemen $12 each to let them go back in and get their luggage, which they did, but this also allowed the firefighters to get a really good look at several members of the gang.
Oh,
This ended up being a problem,
Yeah.
and the arrests of the gang members started coming.
Yeah.
Charles Mackley, also known as Fat Charles, was traced through his luggage. When the police arrived at the address on January 25th, they found Russell Clark, and he was arrested after a struggle. Mackley was followed to an electric and radio store and arrested while he was looking at radios capable of picking up police calls.
I mean, that is necessary.
Henry Pete Pierpont was picked up along with his girlfriend Mary Kinder at a staged routine traffic stop. Dillinger was taken last when he arrived back at the house where Clark was captured. Between all the captured, they found over $25,000 in cash and numerous weapons. The men were extradited back to the Midwest, and Pierpont, Mackley, and Clark were sent to Ohio to be tried for Sheriff Sarber's murder. All 3 men were convicted. Pierpont and Mackley received the death penalty, and Clark got a life sentence. On September 22nd, 1934, Mackley was killed by guards as he and Pierpont tried to escape. Pierpont was wounded but survived and was executed on October 17th.
Okay.
Clark was released from prison in 1968 and died of cancer a few months later.
Was he released on, like, compassionate release because he was sick?
No, he was sentenced to life. That was 34 years.
And it just coincided with him being sick and dying?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Convenient.
Dillinger was extradited to Lake County Jail in Crown Point, Indiana, to stand trial for the murder of Officer O'Malley. He arrived back at Midway Airport on January 30th. It didn't count, so they arrested him in Tucson. It took them 5 days to get him back to Chicago.
Oh.
And it was like 6 different flights because airplanes couldn't fly for that long anymore yet.
Oh, huh.
I forgot to count, but it was like one of the articles I read gave all of the different legs, and it was ridiculous.
How funny.
So, back at Midway Airport on January 30th, and waiting for him there were 32 heavily armed Chicago policemen and a 13-car caravan with 29 troopers from Indiana to escort him to Crown Point, which is 30 miles away from Chicago.
I mean, overkill, but I get it.
The police thought they had him this time.
Yeah.
Local police told the local newspapers that the jail in Crown Point was escape-proof.
Yeah, okay.
So Dillinger was there for a little over a month before he made it out.
Of course.
No one's really sure how it happened. According to the local deputy, Dillinger had a real gun. According to the FBI, he carved a fake one. We'll never know.
Interesting.
On the lam again, Dillinger was indicted by a local grand jury, and the Bureau of Investigation organized a nationwide manhunt for him. But he was on the move. He reunited with his girlfriend in Chicago and then came up to the Twin Cities. Woohoo! Staying in an apartment in South Minneapolis for a couple of weeks and joining up with Hamilton. The two of them formed a super mobster gang with Babyface Nelson's crew and went back to robbing banks.
Oh, okay.
3 days after escaping Crown Point, the gang robbed the Securities National Bank and Trust Company in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. That got them $49,500.
Wow.
And the First National Bank in Mason City, Iowa for $52,000.
They didn't waste time.
Following the Mason City robbery, the gang made it back to St. Paul, saw the doctor because one of the guys was hurt, and then went to Little Bohemia Lodge in Manitowoc Waters, Wisconsin.
Wow. Busy.
The gang had assured the owners that they'd give them no trouble, but the owners got suspicious. They tipped off the U.S. Attorney's Office in Chicago. And a few days later, the lodge was surrounded in the early morning hours, but the officers gave themselves away when they mistakenly shot a local resident and 2 civilian Conservation Corps workers.
Oh my God. They just shot people.
It's like a fucking kindergarten cop movie.
Right.
There was gunfire between the two groups, but the whole gang managed to escape. The gang made their way back to St. Paul, where police caught up with them. So one of the articles I read said that they were coming from, I forget where it said, but it was indicated to the police that they were coming back towards St. Paul over the High Bridge.
Okay.
And if it's the one I'm thinking of, because it's called the High Bridge between a little part of St. Paul that's across the river from the rest of St. Paul, I used to live right off the High Bridge.
Oh, yikes.
When I lived up in Cherokee there.
You could have been in a whole lot of danger, Diana.
Well, I could have been. I mean, there was that shootout in front of my apartment.
No. I mean, you're old enough to have been around during this danger.
Yes. Well, either way.
Yeah.
The gang made their way back to Chicago. Police caught up with them. There was a 20-mile car chase.
Oh.
Hamilton was shot during the chase and later died of his injuries at the Barker Carpus hideout in Aurora, Illinois.
Oh.
1 week after Hamilton's death, the gang robbed the First National Bank of Fostoria, Ohio, which got them $17,000. And then the Merchants National Bank of South Bend, Indiana, which got them $29,890 on June 30th.
They were back on.
By July, the feds didn't have any idea where Dillinger was.
Great.
He was in Chicago.
Okay.
He took the name of Jimmy Lawrence, and he found a job as a clerk. He thought that he could get lost in the shuffle of a big city, but what he didn't know is that Chicago was the epicenter of the federal dragnet trying to take him down.
Oh, my God. How unlucky.
Once the authorities found his car, which was all covered in blood on a side street, they knew he was in town.
Yeah.
On July 21st, the woman in red, Anna Campañas.
Sure.
There are a lot of accent marks I don't understand. The madam of a brothel in Gary, Indiana, contacted the authorities and offered information about Dillinger's whereabouts in exchange for their help in preventing her deportation. Her terms were agreed to, but she was later deported anyway.
Oh, my God.
That's what we do.
Of course.
Anna reported that Dillinger was seeing another sex worker, Polly Hamilton, and that she and the couple would be going to a movie the next day. She wasn't sure if they'd be going to the Biograph or the Marlboro, but she did say that she'd wear an orange dress so that she could be easily identified.
Okay. Smart.
The police were split into 2 groups, and each group staked out one of the theaters. At approximately 8:30 p.m., 3 members of the Dillinger gang went into the Biograph Theater, which was showing Manhattan melodrama starring Clark Gable. When the film ended, an agent stood by the front door and signaled that Dillinger was coming by lighting a cigar. Multiple agents later said that Dillinger looked right at him, glanced across the street, and reached into his pocket, but did not grab his gun. He ran to an alley. 3 agents pursued and fired. Dillinger was hit from behind 4 times. The fatal bullet entered through the back of his neck, severed his spinal cord, passed into his brain, and exited just under his right eye.
Yikes.
The exit wound can be seen on the death masks that were taken.
Ugh. Yuck.
His body was put on display at Cook County Morgue, and it's estimated that 15,000 people came to see his body over a day and a half.
Okay.
He is buried at Crown Hill Cemetery in Indianapolis, Indiana, and the man who was credited with delivering the fatal shot to John Dillinger was given a letter of commendation.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, I guess murder's okay.
So I skipped over a lot. Like, there is so much. So many more gun battles, lots of girlfriends, a case of gonorrhea.
Oh, nice.
The wife left him, obviously.
Yeah.
He got mixed up in the St. Paul crowd that we've talked about before.
Right.
Got in with Babyface, and apparently had ties to the Barker Carpus gang, although the only thing I ever saw was that the one guy went there to die. But what really got me, and, when you think of John Dillinger, well, first of all, what I always think of is that I'd always heard that John Dillinger shot his way out of the Lexington, which was my grandpa's favorite restaurant. And he didn't. There was something with the Lex or something on that block, but it wasn't that, which is too bad because it's a cool story.
You just like ruining all the legends, Diana.
Yeah. Well, I don't know where I ever heard that, but it definitely isn't true. Like, I couldn't even find a rumor, so I don't know if that's something like somebody told me they're that or what. But what really got me when I was researching this is this all happened in like a year and a half.
Yeah, it's funny how many of these things seem so big, and then they go on forever and ever, and then you look at them and it's very short, just a couple weeks, couple years.
No time has passed. And when you look at a lot of those mobster stories, the 30s, the rum runners and the bank robbers and all that shit, like Bonnie and Clyde were only active for a couple of years. This guy was only active for a couple of years. Barker Carpus was only active for a couple of years.
Right.
You think of all of this activity, the gangster stuff is taking up all of the 30s, but it really didn't.
Well, I mean, it's a high-risk lifestyle. I mean, I don't think you can really do those things for all that long.
Right. Well, and the feds were out to get them. This is when J. Edgar Hoover was just rising to power. This is a little bit before the FBI, so it was still the Bureau of Investigations. They were kind of feeling out, like, where their powers were and how much they could do and what their priorities were. But... at the beginning of the story, I called this a murder because it is. They murdered him.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that I'm cool with crime for the most part, but he robbed banks. There was a murder. There were other people that died in the commission of the crimes, although a lot of them were his gang members getting shot by the cops. So there was certainly bad shit going on, but I don't think it's bad shit to the level of murdering him in an alley.
Right. Playing devil's advocate, though, I mean, he was very well armed. He showed that he wasn't afraid of killing people. Like, he didn't value human life. I mean, they went out and robbed a bank, a week after their buddy died?
No, but gotta eat.
So... I can see it being dangerous and, for police to, I guess, escalate or make each other nervous or whatever. But
they also shot him in the back.
I don't know.
Like, I got no time for that.
No, it's true. I guess I just mean I can see it escalating.
But it didn't. He saw them. He ran into an alley. They murdered him.
Yeah.
They didn't try to take him down. Nothing.
Yeah. No, you're right. Not okay.
Maybe I'm just overtired of police brutality.
Also very fair.
So that is the extraordinarily abbreviated story of John Dillinger.
That is a crazy amount of crime.
so crazy. And there's so much more. There's so much
Yeah.
more crazy.
Yeah.
So the other great part of the story is that I was doing the finishing touches here a little while ago up in my office, and Liam came in. I had the Wikipedia article open.
Uh-oh.
And he saw the mugshot. Like when you picture John Dillinger, that's the picture that was up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Liam said, "Who's that?" And I said, "That's John Dillinger." And he goes, "Oh, I know him. He's one of the guys that has his picture up at the Wabasha Street Caves."
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, he went there on a field trip a few weeks ago and remembered that.
He's so your kid.
And he didn't want to go on that field trip. Yeah, this is where I sometimes wonder, like, how much of me is there in them?
Yeah.
In him, because he's definitely
Yeah.
down with the weird medical shit. We've been listening to a lot of that lately. But then he didn't want to go to this Wabasha Street Caves field trip. And I was like, oh my God, they're amazing. You should definitely go.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd been there before, which I didn't remember. And he's like, well, they're creepy. And I'm like, damn right they're creepy. Do you know what's happened down there?
Right. It's awesome.
It's awesome and historic and creepy and horrible. And
Right.
yeah, he liked it.
Oh my God. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's very much your kid.
But I think he's getting to the point where he's like, oh, it's not just my mom that knows this.
Right. You're not just the only
Like,
freak.
This is a big deal.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's funny. So, Diana, I'm almost afraid to ask if you have any advice or call to action after this story, other than like, don't go to prison and learn how to be a better criminal because it's still not going to end well for you.
I'm going to say this as another, progeny of a grocer.
Okay.
I don't care what your daddy tells you.
Uh-huh.
Call a lawyer.
Yes. Always call it, especially if you're innocent.
Yeah. I mean, my dad's a grocer, and I'm pretty sure if I ended up in jail, first of all, he'd be super mad.
Right.
Super mad. And then second, like the first thing he would do is probably call a lawyer for me.
Yes. No, that's good advice.
So yeah, call a lawyer. If you can't afford one, the state will appoint you one. Go ahead
Right.
and take advantage of that.
Right. Whether you are guilty or innocent, like call a lawyer, talk to someone.
Especially if you aren't guilty.
Right. Right. Well, and when we were at the True Crime Podcast Festival, we went to that, was it Women in Podcasting, panel's the word I want. There was one girl there, I think from Fatalities, and she talked about how she could make anyone in the audience confess to anything, even if they didn't do it, just using like psychological tricks. And so have someone there with you.
Yep. I almost wanted to, like, there was limited time and we were talking about other things, but I almost wanted to be like, I volunteer as tribute.
Right? No, that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, pick something awful, get me to confess.
Right. I feel like it wouldn't take a whole lot for me to confess.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. It would be really fascinating to see all of the tricks, though.
Right. And I always think, because you see, I don't know if you watched Making a Murderer, but
A little bit. I watched some of it.
yeah, there was that whole time where they were getting Brendan Dassey to confess, and he just wanted to go back to school. Like,
Right.
He had no idea what's going on, totally innocent of everything.
Right.
And, I watched that and I'm like, all right, that's a kid that has some pretty severe, like, learning limitations.
Right.
And is lower on the IQ scale than some
Right.
other folks, and has not had a robust upbringing.
Right.
I could see where somebody like that's pretty easy to break, but I feel like I wouldn't be. And to be shown how it's done, I think would be fascinating.
Yeah. See, and I definitely would be because I'm such a people pleaser. Like, I would say whatever they asked me to. But
If you get the right person,
yeah.
I bet any of us would be.
Yeah. No, it's true.
And especially, I mean, it's one thing for a nice lady we know that does a podcast
Right.
to try to do it. But if I were in an interrogation room with the police, with the current, like, state of affairs as they're going in on our, current situation, worried about what happens to my kid
Yeah.
if I don't go home that night,
Right.
I don't know what I'd confess to.
Right. Just anything to let me go home and make sure he's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and especially as, I don't want to play the single parent card here, but as a single parent, I don't have a lot of time to figure it out.
No, yeah.
You know, I don't have another parent I can call and be like, you take care of the kid, I'll take care of staying out of jail.
Right, right.
You know, and, you know, once I'm in jail, do they come take my kid? Does he get in the system? Like, there's so many things.
Absolutely.
That, yeah, if you tell me that I can get out of here and have a light felony and a fine, fuck yeah, let's do this.
Right, exactly. I mean, I'll come get your kid, Diana. We won't let him go.
Well, I should give you my mom's number for bail money.
Right.
But again, I don't know if you hanging on to the kid, like, is that valid? If they want to take me down for something and I've confessed to something horrible.
Yeah, no.
Like, I have family, I have you, I have other friends that would take him. They just toss him in the system anyway.
Well, I mean, and the police might use that as leverage, but there are limits to that too, right? Because, like, social services doesn't just want a ton of kids. Like, if there's somebody who can take him, they're not going to take on another burden.
Yeah.
They have enough going on already. So I think it would be okay.
Can I make suggestions as to where I would like him to be?
Right. Go with these people. Don't go with these people.
Right. Please avoid.
Right. Not these guys.
Call a lawyer.
Call a lawyer.
And then call your people.
Yes, call your people. Make sure they're not in prison. Call them to let them know you're not in prison.
Just check in. Say hey.
Yeah.
It's been real hot.
Yep.
Make sure they're not super hot.
Right. Well, I mean, we've covered murders where people murdered people because it was hot. So call your people.
Oh my God. I could see where they're coming from.
Right.
Sometimes you're...
Yeah. Just so hot, I'm going to kill someone.
Oh man. Sometimes when it's that hot, there's nothing that's going to help.
No.
So call your people. Make sure they're not feeling stabby because it's hot.
Right.
If they are feeling stabby, bring them a lemonade or something.
And a lawyer. Call them a lawyer.
And don't end up on next week's episode.